Welcome to the IZ podcast. Number 31 is Culture Gatekeepers by Dr. Stephen Phinney. The church must rise with compassion and conviction, speaking the timeless truth of Christ in a language Gen Z can understand. Generation Z, born between 1997 and present, is reshaping cultural norms across industries by rejecting exclusionary practices and championing inclusivity, collaboration, and authenticity. Fantasy fanatics. Generation Z's deep connection to fantasy franchises is, in many ways, an inheritance from their parents, primarily Gen X and Millennials, who came of age during the golden era of superhero storytelling. Raised in homes where comic books, Saturday morning cartoons, and blockbuster superhero films were cultural staples, Gen Z absorbed a love for imaginative worlds and heroic narratives early on. This generational handoff created a shared language of capes, quests, and cosmic battles, but Gen Z has taken it further, embracing fantasy not just as entertainment, but as a canvas for identity, inclusivity, and social commentary. Their fandom is both nostalgic and unrealistic, shaped by the heroic ideals passed down and reimagined through their own lens, which integrates fantasy with justice, diversity, and digital creativity, frequently causing depression and revolt. In a world saturated with digital content, Gen Z often finds the line between reality and fantasy increasingly blurred. Raised on immersive media, augmented realities, and curated online personas, many in this generation navigate a constant stream of idealized narratives that can distort their sense of what's authentic. When caught, they slip into disappointment and despair. Fantasy offers a powerful escape from real-world stressors, especially in the wake of global crises and mental health challenges, but overexposure can sometimes lead to disconnection or disillusionment. As they seek meaning and belonging, Gen Z faces the unique challenge of grounding themselves in truth, particularly biblical truth, while still embracing the creativity and hope that fantasy provides. Balancing imagination with discernment has become a defining tension of their cultural moment. For many in Gen Z, real life feels overwhelmingly stressful, marked by economic uncertainty, climate anxiety, social fragmentation, and the lingering effects of global wars. These pressures often make the real world seem not only unstable but emotionally oppressive. In response, some retreat into fantasy-driven goals, dreams of instant fame, idealized relationships, or utopian lifestyles shaped by digital media and fictional narratives. While imagination is a powerful coping tool, these fantasy goals usually become disheartening when they fail to materialize in the face of real-world limitations. The result is a generation caught between high hopes and harsh realities, striving to reconcile their longing for meaning with the need for grounded, achievable purpose. Weak parental training. Many Gen Z young adults are entering the real world feeling underprepared, not because they lack intelligence or potential, but because the environments they were raised in often prioritized comfort over resilience. In an effort to protect their children from hardship, many well-meaning parents smoothed every bump in the road, unintentionally shielding them from the very challenges that build grit, independence, and problem-solving skills. As a result, some Gen Z struggle with basic life skills, emotional regulation, and the confidence to face failure head-on. This isn't a condemnation of parents, but a wake-up call. Preparing the next generation means allowing them to stumble, stretch, and grow. True love equips, not insulates. Sidewalk, my truth versus biblical truth. Most Gen Z have grown up in a cultural landscape where biblical truth has been increasingly sidelined, in part due to a generational shift that began with their parents. Studies show that Millennials and Gen X, who make up the majority of Gen Z's parents, have significantly distanced themselves from traditional Christian beliefs, the church, often embracing moral relativism and secular values. As a result, many Gen Zers were not raised with consistent exposure to scripture, church community, or a biblical worldview. Instead, they inherited a fragmented spiritual framework, make up your own, where truth is often seen as personal, subjective, and not doctrinal. This generational drift has left many young people spiritually unanchored, searching for identity and meaning in a world that offers countless voices but little lasting truth. Yet even now, God is calling this generation back to Himself, and revival is still possible. However, few have the ambition to discover a God they cannot see. The results? Typically, they identify themselves as a God. They call themselves gatekeepers. Gen Z often uses the term gatekeeper playfully or critically to describe someone who controls access to information, trends, or communities, especially in online spaces. But when they call themselves gatekeepers, it's usually a tongue-in-cheek way of signaling that they're in the know about something niche, cool, or culturally significant, and deciding whether or not to share it. This behavior stems from a broader cultural shift. Gen Z grew up in a world of information overload, where authenticity and originality are prized. So, gatekeeping can be a way to protect what feels personal or sacred, like a favorite artist, a hidden gem of a restaurant, or a nostalgic childhood show, from being overexposed or commercialized. At the same time, there's a growing backlash against gatekeeping, with many Gen Zers promoting openness and inclusivity. That's why you'll often see posts that say, "I want to gatekeep this," but a wink to the tension between wanting to share and wanting to preserve something special. It's a fascinating mix of irony, identity, and digital culture. While Gen Z often uses gatekeeping as a way to protect niche interests or preserve authenticity, this behavior can unintentionally deepen feelings of isolation and loneliness. By drawing lines around who belongs and who doesn't, especially in online communities, gatekeeping can create exclusion rather than connection. In a generation already facing record-high levels of loneliness and suicide, the pressure to be in the know or to meet unspoken standards can discourage genuine interaction and vulnerability. What begins as a defense of identity can become a barrier to belonging, leaving many feeling unseen in the very spaces meant to unite them. All of this has resulted in Gen Z being known as the snob generation. The risk and consequences. Gen Z is facing an unprecedented mental health crisis, with loneliness at its core. Despite being the most digitally connected generation, many Gen Zers report feeling profoundly isolated, cut off from meaningful relationships and overwhelmed by social comparison, fear of failure, and a lack of belonging. This chronic disconnection is more than emotional, it's dangerous. Studies show that loneliness is closely linked to rising rates of depression and suicidal thoughts among young adults. As they navigate a world marked by instability, trauma, and relentless pressure, many are struggling to find hope and purpose. Without strong support systems and a renewed sense of community, this generation risks becoming defined not just by its innovation, but by its silent suffering. The church must reach them. If the church fails to reach Generation Z with Yeshua's truth, love, and spiritual clarity, it risks leaving a spiritual vacuum that could be filled by confusion, moral relativism, and despair. This generation is already navigating unprecedented levels of anxiety, identity crisis, and disconnection from biblical truth. Without the grounding of the gospel, Gen Z may drift further into a culture that normalizes what Scripture calls depravity, exchanging truth for lies and light for darkness. Romans 1 verses 21 to 25. This is not a prophecy of doom, it's a call to action. The church must rise with compassion and conviction, speaking the timeless truth of Christ in a language Gen Z can understand. If we don't disciple them, the world surely will. And the cost of silence could be a generation lost not only to culture, but to eternity. Thank you for listening. Stay safe in the indwelling life of Yeshua. Until next time.
Today's program was brought to you by Identity Matters Worldview Media. We provide short films, media bites, podcasts, and other productions to help authentic believers discover their identity in the life of Yeshua. You can discover over 1,000 productions at iomamerica.net.